When you feel guilty for walking away from someone who was hurting you, the weight inside your chest becomes heavier than the pain they caused. It's a strange, quiet burden. Leaving someone who was never good for you, and somehow carrying the feeling that you've done something wrong. So breathe with me now, slowly, gently. Let your inhale loosen the guilt that rises when you remember their voice, their sadness, their confusion. Let your exhale soften the tension of choosing yourself even when it made you feel like the villain in a story you tried so hard to save. The truth is simple, but your heart doesn't know how to accept it yet. Walking away from someone who hurt you is not cruelty. It is courage. But courage often feels like guilt when you've spent too long caring for people who treated your love as a convenience. You didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because staying was destroying you. And that distinction matters more than your heart can understand right now. Take another breath, deeper this time. You feel guilty because you were conditioned to believe that leaving is an act of harm. You were taught to hold the relationship together, to be patient, to be forgiving, to be understanding, even when your emotional needs were ignored, minimized, or dismissed entirely. You are not feeling guilt, you are feeling the withdrawal from a role you were forced into, the caretaker, the forgiver, the one who carries both halves of the relationship. When you finally put that weight down, your body doesn't know how to feel free. It interprets freedom as guilt because freedom is new and unfamiliar. Staying would have been easier in the moment. It would have spared you these nights of overthinking, of replaying the story, of wondering if you made a mistake. But staying would have cost you your peace. Staying would have broken something inside you. Staying would have taught your heart that its needs don't matter. Breathe. Let your heart hear the truth your mind has already discovered. Leaving was an act of self-respect. You feel guilty because somewhere along the way you learned to shrink yourself to avoid hurting others, even when they were hurting you. You learned to prioritize their feelings above your own safety. You learned that love means holding on, even when holding on was tearing you apart. But love that costs your well-being is not love. It is self-abandonment disguised as loyalty. Walking away from someone who hurt you is not abandoning them. It is choosing not to abandon yourself. And that is the hardest decision you will ever make. You didn't leave because you wanted to hurt them. You left because you could no longer survive the emotional damage of staying. When someone repeatedly hurts you, dismisses your needs, invalidates your feelings, or makes you carry emotional weight they refuse to acknowledge, your heart begins to collapse under the pressure. You leave not out of anger, but out of necessity. And necessity always feels harsh to the heart that still remembers the early softness. Take another breath. The guilt you feel is a sign of your compassion, not your wrongness. You cared deeply. You tried sincerely. You offered understanding long after it was reciprocated. You gave them chances long after they stopped giving you hope. Guilt is not evidence that you should have stayed. Guilt is evidence that you were the one who loved with sincerity. Emotional harm doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like slow neglect. Sometimes it looks like feeling invisible. Sometimes it looks like loving someone who only reaches for you when they need something from you. Sometimes it looks like being the emotional anchor they rely on while never offering stability in return. And when you finally walk away from that pattern, the space it creates inside you feels like loss, even though it is actually relief in disguise. Breathe again, slowly. Notice how your body softens when you let yourself admit that staying would have continued the cycle. You feel guilty because you still see the human in them. You still remember the version that was gentle. You still hope they will heal someday. But you cannot sacrifice yourself for someone who is not ready to confront their own wounds. You cannot be their cure. You cannot be their stability. You cannot be their therapist, their savior, their emotional glue. You walked away because you finally understood that saving them meant losing yourself. And losing yourself is the deepest heartbreak of all. One day, your heart will look back at this moment and feel gratitude instead of guilt. Gratitude that you chose yourself before it was too late. Gratitude that you found the strength to step away from pain disguised as connection. Gratitude that you finally listened to the part of you that whispered, "I deserve better than this." Tonight, let your guilt breathe. It is not here to punish you. It is here to release you. It is here to show you how deeply you loved and how deeply you tried. And one breath at a time, that guilt will transform into peace. The peace that comes from choosing a life where your heart is no longer shrinking to survive. When you feel guilty for walking away from someone who was hurting you, you are not grieving the person you left. You are grieving the version of yourself that stayed for so long. The version that tolerated the distance, the inconsistency, the emotional neglect. The version that tried to justify their behavior, tried to understand their wounds, tried to be patient while your own heart was slowly collapsing. So breathe now, gently, and let your inhale acknowledge the weight of that old self. Let your exhale honor the part of you that finally chose to step away. Guilt appears because your heart has not yet caught up with your truth. Your truth is that you needed to leave. Your truth is that staying was harming you. Your truth is that your boundaries were the only thing holding your identity together. But your heart still remembers the moments when love felt real, and it interprets leaving as betrayal, even though what you betrayed was the pattern that kept destroying your peace. Take another breath, deeper this time. Your guilt is also a sign of your emotional sensitivity. You did not walk away lightly. You did not leave without thought. You did not close the door without feeling the pain of doing so. This is why your healing will be profound, because you left with awareness, not with indifference. The people who hurt you often move on quickly, not because they feel less, but because they avoid confronting the emotional weight of what they created. You, instead, are confronting everything: the hurt they caused, the hope you held, the disappointment that accumulated, the courage it took to let go. That confrontation feels like guilt, but guilt is just the echo of your empathy. You wonder if you should have stayed longer. You wonder if they would have changed. You wonder if leaving broke something in them. But ask yourself gently, how many times did staying break something in you? How many nights did you cry silently because you felt unseen? How many times did you forgive hurt that should never have happened? How many excuses did you invent to justify their emotional absence? Take another breath. Staying would not have saved them. It would have only continued the cycle that was draining you. Some people only grow when the people they leaned on finally step away. Leaving was not the problem. Your absence might be their first real mirror. And even if they never grow, your healing no longer depends on their choices. You feel guilty because a part of you still believes it was your job to carry the relationship. But relationships are not meant to be carried. They are meant to be shared. You walked away because you were carrying both halves, and the weight became too heavy for one heart alone. Guilt is not a sign that you made the wrong decision. It is a sign that you stayed long enough to care deeply. It is the residue of love, not the evidence of a mistake. Let your breath remind you, you are not responsible for someone else's inability to show up. You are not responsible for their unhealed wounds. You are not responsible for fixing emotional patterns they refuse to acknowledge. You are responsible only for protecting your heart when love turns into harm. And protecting your heart will never be something to feel guilty about. Breathe again. Notice how the tightness in your chest softens when you allow yourself to accept that leaving was an act of self-love. a quiet, brave, imperfect act of choosing survival over suffering. One day the guilt will fade. One day you will look back and see clearly that walking away was the moment you started returning to yourself. One day you will realize that the pain of leaving was smaller than the pain of staying. And when that awareness finally settles, guilt will no longer have a place inside you. Tonight, you are not asked to be completely healed. You are only asked to breathe, to feel, to acknowledge the courage it took to step out of something that was hurting you. You are allowed to mourn the story. You are allowed to miss the good moments. You are allowed to feel conflicted. But you are also allowed to rest in the truth that you chose yourself. And choosing yourself is not selfishness. It is survival. And survival is never something to apologize for.